Let me say something that almost nobody will say plainly because it upsets people and it gets twisted the second it leaves your mouth. If you're a man dating women in the 30 to 35 range, you're not walking into a normal dating pool. You're walking into a high pressure environment where the incentives are different, the pace is different, and the emotional temperature is different. Not because women in that bracket are bad. Plenty of women in their early 30s are great partners, calm, loyal, feminine, emotionally steady, ready to build. Those women exist. But the dating pool you're actually seeing at 30 to 35 is not a random sample of all women that age. It's a subset. And if you don't understand what subset you're dealing with, you'll mistake urgency for depth. You'll confuse intensity for compatibility. You'll mistake speed for certainty. And you'll end up trapped in someone else's timeline, paying for it with your peace, your options, and sometimes your entire life plan. So let's talk about why this age range has become the riskiest bracket for men to date seriously, and how to navigate it without becoming cynical, paranoid, or cruel. Because this isn't about disrespecting women, it's about pattern recognition and self protection. Here's the first thing you need to accept. By the early 30s, a lot of the most emotionally stable, relationship oriented women are already partnered. They paired off earlier, late 20s, around 30. They're building families or building a marriage. They're not on apps swiping every night. They're not doing first dates like a part time job. That doesn't mean every single woman in her early 30s is a problem. There are real reasons good women are single at 33. They left a bad relationship. They focused on career and are now ready. They moved cities. They took care of family. They didn't want to settle. Sometimes it's simply that they didn't meet the right person. But it does mean something important for you as a man. The pool is concentrated. The incentives are sharper. And you'll meet more women who are dating with a sense of urgency. Because the women who don't feel urgency are more likely to be off the market. That's the first dynamic. Now let's talk about the second dynamic, because this is the one men feel in their bones but don't always know how to describe. The 30 to 35 window can be emotionally overloaded for many single women. Not all, but many. By this point, they've lived through a decade of modern dating, apps, situationships, short-term relationships, false starts, the guy who wouldn't commit, the guy who committed and then cheated, the guy who promised a future and delayed it until she finally walked away. And that history doesn't disappear when you show up. It comes with her, sometimes as wisdom, sometimes as caution, sometimes as bitterness, sometimes as anxiety. And the key issue is this: the anxiety is often not about you, but it will land on you. It shows up as pressure, as speed, as evaluation, as a constant need to define the relationship early, as impatience with normal pacing, as what are we doing here? Energy before the connection has even had time to breathe. I'll give you a picture of what this looks like. A man goes on a first date with a 33-year-old. Within an hour, she references an ex multiple times. She asks about his 5-year plan. She asks where he stands on kids. She asks what he thinks about schooling. She slips in a comment about time, about not wanting to waste it. And the man is sitting there thinking he's on a date. But he's not. He's in an interview, not an interview for her affection, an interview for a position in her life plan. And that's what men need to understand. In this bracket, for some women, dating stops being discovery and starts being recruitment. It becomes less, do we connect naturally, and more, can you fit into the structure I need before the window closes? This is where men get fooled, because the woman will often frame her urgency as maturity. She'll say, I know what I want. She'll say, I'm not into games anymore. She'll say, I'm dating with intention. And that can be true. It can be healthy, but it can also be cover for fear. It can be panic dressed up as purpose. And a man needs to know how to tell the difference, because those two things sound similar in conversation. Healthy intention is calm. Panic is demanding. Healthy intention is patient. Panic rushes. Healthy intention is curious about you. Panic is focused on outcomes. Healthy intention asks, who are you, really? Panic asks, can you do this? Yes or no? When the internal deadline turns up, the entire dynamic changes. For a woman who feels a clock in her chest, every date becomes a decision point. Every interaction becomes a verdict. Every delay becomes a threat. And men don't realize how much this alters her behavior until they're inside it. It changes what she listens for. It changes what she reacts to. It changes what she interprets as serious. At 25, a man saying, let's take this slow and get to know each other, often reads as mature, attractive, stable. At 33, with anxiety underneath, the same sentence can be interpreted as a warning sign, not because the sentence is wrong, because the fear is loud. And fear doesn't hear nuance. So what happens? She stops meeting you as an individual. She starts measuring you against a script, not always consciously, but the pattern is there. A template forms from accumulated disappointment. Men are like this. Guys always do that. I can't go through that again. Last time I waited, I got burned. So she tightens the process. She tries to eliminate uncertainty by forcing clarity early. And that's where a man starts feeling like he's failing a test he never agreed to take. You're not allowed to build feelings over time. You're expected to arrive with feelings ready-made. You're not allowed to be unsure. You're expected to be certain immediately. You're not allowed to observe. You're expected to commit. This is what I mean when I say it's risky, because real relationships have stages: discovery, trust, consistency, conflict, repair, deeper commitment, life integration, and none of that can be speedrun without consequences. You can skip stages in the beginning, but you don't erase them. You just postpone them. They show up later as incompatibility, resentment, power struggles, and a marriage that feels like a contract instead of a bond. Now let's talk about the external pressure, because men underestimate how much it shapes the whole energy. Women in this bracket are not dating in a vacuum. They're dating under observation, family pressure, friends' milestones, social media, a constant stream of engagement rings, baby announcements, married weekends, family photos, vacations with husbands. We're expecting posts. Even if she's not obsessed with it, it's there. And it creates a quiet background message. You're behind. Catch up. Fix this. Now. So when she dates you, she's not just evaluating you. She's defending herself to her environment. She's trying to prove she's not left behind. She's trying to secure a future that will silence questions. And again, that's not your fault. But it becomes your burden if you don't hold your frame. This is where men get pulled into an emotional funnel, because the relationship isn't approached like let's build something real. It's approached like let's land the plane. Fast, direct, no turbulence allowed. And if you ask for normal pacing, you're framed as the problem. You become the guy wasting her time. You become the guy afraid of commitment. You become just like the others. That's the most dangerous part. Because once you're labeled, she doesn't have to self reflect. She doesn't have to look at her own urgency. She can put the blame on you and keep the machine running. This is why you'll hear the same cycle again and again. A man tries to pace things naturally. He wants to see character. He wants to see consistency. He wants to see how she handles conflict. He wants to see if values match beyond we both want a family. And the response is pressure, exclusivity early, defining the relationship early, meeting family early, moving in early, engagement talk early, because the longer it takes, the more her anxiety grows. So she tries to control the timeline, but control doesn't create trust. It kills it because the man feels managed instead of loved. He feels recruited instead of chosen. And when a man feels recruited, he either runs or he submits. If he runs, he becomes another one who wouldn't commit. If he submits, he becomes resentful. And resentment is poison. Now let's be honest about another dynamic in this bracket. Some women in this age range overestimate how much time they have and underestimate how quickly they're asking a man to reorganize his life. You'll see it in how they present themselves. Old photos. Still young at heart, language. A desire for the fun, carefree dating pace of their 20s mixed with the commitment urgency of their 30s. It creates contradiction. They want immediate certainty, but also want to be courted, like there's no pressure. They want you to be stable, but also want you to be endlessly exciting. They want you to be emotionally available, but not needy. They want provider energy, but also want you to be fully present and never distracted by work. They want maturity, but also want constant novelty. And the man is sitting there trying to hit 10 targets at once. That's why this bracket can feel like a no-win situation for men. Not because women are evil, because the pressure produces contradictory demands, and the man becomes responsible for managing her anxiety, her expectations, her timeline, her trust issues, her past disappointments, and her family's questions. That's not a relationship. That's emotional labor with a wedding deadline. You become less of a boyfriend and more of an emotional maintenance worker, cleaning up messes that were created before you arrived. A healthy relationship doesn't require you to fix what you didn't break. It requires two adults who can regulate themselves. Now, let's talk about dating apps, because apps amplify all of this. Apps reward superficial sorting. They compress people into checkboxes. They make it easy to reject, easy to replace, easy to compare. So a woman in this bracket can develop a hyper-specific list of requirements, not because she's insane, because she's trying to reduce risk. She's trying to avoid repeating mistakes. But when a list becomes a substitute for judgment, it backfires. Because a checklist can't measure character. A checklist can't measure loyalty. A checklist can't measure emotional stability under stress. A checklist can't measure how someone handles disagreement. A checklist can't measure integrity. It just measures resume items. So what happens? She filters for the most obvious signals: income, height, education, lifestyle. And then she wonders why the men she selects don't commit. Because the men with the strongest marketplace options tend to move slowly on commitment. They don't rush into a legal, emotional, and parental contract with someone who is pressuring them. They can afford to wait. And women who feel time pressure interpret waiting as rejection. So the friction increases. More pressure, more tests, more demands, more suspicion, and the very behavior that was supposed to secure commitment becomes the reason commitment never forms. Now, I want to say something that's going to save you if you take it seriously. Urgency is not proof of love. Urgency is proof of urgency. It can come from genuine desire, yes, but it can also come from fear, social pressure, and internal deadlines. And you need to build the skill of separating those. Because men get flattered by urgency. She knows what she wants. She's serious. She's not playing games. And you ignore that she hasn't actually learned who you are. She's learned that you're a candidate. That's not romance. That's selection under pressure. And when someone needs you to commit before they know you, they don't want you. They want what you represent. A timeline solution, a future image, a life milestone, a social proof upgrade. And you can empathize with why she feels that pressure without allowing it to dictate your pace. This is where men need to get disciplined. Your reluctance to move fast is not immaturity, it's wisdom. Your desire to observe is not fear, it's intelligence. Because the cost of getting it wrong is high. If you're 32 and you rush into a marriage because she needed certainty fast, you can lose years of your life and a huge chunk of your finances on the back end. If you rush into fatherhood with a woman you barely understand, you can lock yourself into a permanent bond with someone who may not be stable. And you don't get to undo that. You can leave a relationship. You can't undo a child. So you need to move with calm strength. Now let's get practical. If you're dating in this bracket, you need to know what to watch for, not to attack women, to protect yourself. Here are the patterns that should make you slow down immediately. First date, time talk. Heavy ex talk early, especially if every ex is painted as the villain and she has no role in her own story. Pressure for exclusivity before real trust exists. Anger or contempt directed at time wasters in a way that sounds less like boundaries and more like bitterness. Rapid escalation, parent meetings early, moving in quickly, marriage talk within months, future planning that doesn't include your input, a tendency to interpret normal pacing as avoidance, therapy vocabulary used like a weapon, every disagreement turned into diagnosis, every boundary framed as a flaw, and perhaps the most important sign, a lack of curiosity about you as a person. If her questions are all about outcomes, timelines, roles, and logistics, but she doesn't really want to know your mind, your character, your habits, your values and practice, your friendships, your weaknesses, what you're building, how you live day to day, then she's not connecting, she's recruiting. Now, there's another reality men need to understand. Some women in this bracket have been single long enough that they've become rigid. They have a routine, their own space, their own way of doing everything, and that's fine. But then they expect you to merge into their established life without disruption. They want the benefits of partnership without the friction of partnership. They want you to adapt more than they adapt. They want you to bring stability, but they don't want to shift their patterns. So they pressure you for commitment, but they don't actually have the flexibility and softness required to build with another person. That creates a future problem, even if the beginning looks good, because marriage and family require collaboration, not just agreement on goals, agreement on lifestyle, conflict style, money philosophy, boundaries with family, division of responsibilities, emotional regulation. And none of that can be assessed properly when the relationship is being pushed like a project with deadlines. Real compatibility is boring at first. It looks like consistency. It looks like calm. It looks like two people building a rhythm. Panic hates calm. Panic wants fireworks, certainty, and reassurance. So if you're dating a woman whose nervous system is set to high, understand what you're signing up for. Because at 30 to 35, some women are not seeking a man. They're seeking relief. Relief from family pressure. Relief from comparison. Relief from fear. Relief from feeling behind. And if you become her relief, you won't be cherished. You'll be used as a stabilizer. The moment you stop providing relief, the relationship feels unsafe to her, and she blames you for it. Now, to be fair, men can contribute to this dynamic. A lot of men waste women's time in their 20s. They keep things casual while taking the benefits. They delay commitment while building their careers. They promise futures they're not sure about. So by the time a woman reaches her early 30s, she's more guarded. That part is understandable. But a man is not obligated to pay the bill for what other men did. If she can't date you as you, then she's not ready for you. She's ready for a storyline. Now let's address the biggest trap for men in this bracket. You meet a woman. She's attractive. She's smart. She's fun. There's chemistry. You think, finally, someone serious. Then you feel the pressure ramp up. But you don't want to lose her, so you accommodate. You speed up your pace. You compromise your standards. You start making promises before you've done your due diligence. And you tell yourself it's fine because she's mature. But maturity isn't about age. Maturity is about how a person handles uncertainty. A mature woman can want marriage and kids and still allow a connection to grow naturally. A mature woman can communicate her desires without turning them into deadlines. A mature woman can say, I want a family, without making you responsible for her fear. And here's the line you should hold. Her timeline is not your emergency. Her anxiety is not your obligation. Her past disappointments are not your job to repair. Your job is to move at a pace that keeps your judgment intact. Because the most expensive mistake a man can make is committing while confused. So what should you do if you want to date women in this bracket without getting trapped? You do 3 things. You lead with clarity. You maintain pace. You watch behavior. Clarity means you're honest about what you want and what you don't. You want kids or you don't. You want marriage or you don't. You want to build towards something serious or you don't. You don't hide it to keep her interested, because hiding it creates confusion later. Pace means you don't let her urgency dictate your decisions. You don't move in faster than you normally would. You don't propose on a schedule. You don't merge finances early. You don't make permanent commitments because someone is impatient. And watching behavior means you stop listening only to words. Many women can say the right things. It's easy to say, I'm ready. It's easy to say, I'm serious. It's easy to say, I want something real. What matters is how she behaves when she doesn't get what she wants immediately. Does she get hostile? Does she guilt you? Does she weaponize fear? Does she threaten to leave? Does she call you immature? Does she punish you emotionally? Or does she stay steady, communicate, and allow the connection to develop? That tells you who you're dealing with, because the pressure you feel early will be the pressure you live with later. If she can't regulate now, she won't magically regulate after marriage. If she uses manipulation now, she will use manipulation when kids and money are involved. So do not ignore early patterns just because you're attracted. Now, let's talk about something men don't like to hear. Sometimes the reason the 30 to 35 bracket feels so intense is because men in that same bracket are valuable. Men in their early 30s who are fit, stable, building, emotionally solid, and not burned out are in demand. That means you have leverage, and leverage is not something to abuse. It's something to respect. It means you can choose a woman who is calm, cooperative, and aligned. It means you don't have to accept pressure as the price of entry. It means you can walk away from a dynamic that feels like obligation disguised as romance. And walking away doesn't make you cruel. It makes you disciplined. Because if you're building a life, the partner you choose can either multiply your peace or drain your future. Now, none of this means you should avoid women in this age range. It means you should stop romanticizing the pressure. Pressure is not passion. Pressure is not she really wants you. Pressure is often she really wants an outcome. And if you become the outcome, your individuality disappears. You become a role: husband, father, provider, stabilizer, therapist, social proof. And when you're reduced to a role, your humanity becomes optional. That is where resentment begins. So here's the clean, mature approach for men dating 30 to 35. Move slow enough to see who she is, fast enough to not play games, but slow enough to keep your judgment. Ask real questions, not just, do you want kids? Ask, what does a stable home look like to you day to day? Ask, how do you handle conflict when you're upset? Ask, what did you learn from your last relationship? Ask, what patterns are you working on? Ask, what do you do when you feel anxious? Ask, what does partnership mean to you in practice? Because you're not choosing someone's intentions. You're choosing their habits, their temperament, their ability to collaborate, their ability to be accountable. And if you do that, you'll quickly separate women who are genuinely ready from women who are simply afraid. And that's the whole point. Because a woman who is truly ready is not frantic. She doesn't need to rush you into submission. She doesn't need to test you constantly. She doesn't need to turn every conversation into a verdict. She's calm, direct, consistent, and she builds with you. A woman who is panicking will try to force you into a timeline. And if you let her, you'll wake up a year later wondering how you got there. So I'll leave you with this. Dating in the 30 to 35 bracket is risky for men, not because women are the problem, but because timeline pressure turns dating into a high stakes negotiation instead of a slow, natural bond. And the man who doesn't understand that can be guilted, pressured, and manipulated into a life altering decision he wasn't ready for. Your responsibility is simple. Don't let someone else's fear choose your future. Move at your pace, hold your standards, pay attention to behavior, and remember this: a healthy woman doesn't need you to rush. She needs you to lead. If you've experienced this kind of pressure, talk about it in the comments. Not to attack anyone, as data, as pattern recognition. What did it look like for you? Where did the pressure start? How did it escalate? And what did you do about it? Men need to hear each other clearly on this, because rushing into commitment to avoid wasting time is one of the fastest ways to waste your entire life.